Welcome to House Rules. I'm your host today, Speaker Mike Schultz. I live in Hooper, and I have the opportunity to represent House District 12, which consists of 5 cities: Hooper, West Haven, portions of West Haven, portions of Roy, Clinton, and West Point. So I'm honored to be able to be joined with you today with Representative Gricius, Stephanie Gricius, and Representative Kristen Chevrier, Maha Moms, right?
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
So last week, the USDA announced major changes to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, as it's referred to. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because both of you ran bills in the MAHA movement. Representative Chevrier, you ran 2 bills in the MAHA movement. Representative Gricius, you ran a fluoride bill. Let's talk about those for just a minute.
I'll talk about the SNAP and the food dye bills. The SNAP bill was it was a bill that made it so that we had to apply for a federal waiver to make it so that we could remove soda from our SNAP funding. Oh. Soda is the biggest expense for SNAP dollars, and it's also one of the least nutritious things.
Wait, back up. You just said soda is the biggest expense on the SNAP program. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
You're kidding me. More people purchase soda pop with the SNAP waiver or SNAP program than any other food?
Yes, it is the largest purchase.
Wow.
With SNAP dollars. So there are many reasons to remove it. One of those is that we're spending too many tax dollars on it. And the other one is that it's not providing any nutrition, and it is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Properly named.
Right. So this returns that program, or starts to return that program to its proper role. And
so you passed the bill. Tell us what's happened since.
Okay, so we passed the bill. We have waited for a little bit for Department of Workforce Services to be able to get all the paperwork done and get things submitted to the federal government, and then have some changes made. And then just last week, I think it was last week, it was signed for real.
Last Tuesday, I think it was actually.
Which is very exciting. And actually, I was very gratified to see that DWS was excited about it. They did not expect that it would be signed at all, probably.
I remember that.
But certainly not that quickly.
Yeah. No, I remember there was a lot of discussion during the session as you were passing that bill. Why are we doing this? It's not going to get signed. The waiver.
And a lot of dread, because in the bill we said if it didn't pass, they had to submit it until it did.
Yeah.
And I think they were really afraid it was going to be multiple submissions. Yeah. But no, it's just one.
So Utah let out on that issue, right? First state in the nation to pass that. Now, there was a couple states that got their waiver submitted before Utah that got approved. Mm-hmm. So we weren't the first state in the nation to to actually have the program implemented.
Right.
But we're the first state in the nation to pass the legislation.
We were, which was kind of exciting.
Yeah, it was exciting.
It was fun to lead. And one of the great things about that is that when the states put something forward, it helps to move the federal government, because the federal government is so slow to move on these things. But they get the push from one state. Yeah. And what did they say about?
We're going to come back to that. Okay. I want to come back to that because it is important. I want to end on that if we can.
Okay.
Because I think it's part of the neatest part of the story. I think.
Okay.
So let's talk.
Do you want to go to fluoride?
We just talked about first state in the nation to pass the SNAP bill removing soda pop. Representative Gricius, let's talk about your bill on fluoride and being the first state in the nation. Do you want to start?
Yeah, so HB 81 fluoride amendments, we were the first state to pass it and the first state to implement it. Florida has followed suit, and there are a good handful of other
Florida
states.
Has now started.
Mm-hmm. Florida's now started, and there are a handful of other states that are looking at doing the same thing. And so I've been getting calls on a regular basis from around the country saying, how did you do this? How can we do it? And it's actually really fun because Utah doesn't normally see that level of national attention, even though we are the coolest state in the nation. We're the greatest. We are the best, the number one state. But we kind of just do our own thing. And so it's been really neat to have other states reach out. But that was a really cool experience to be able to pass that. And we did this in a way, too, that really prioritized individual choice in someone's healthcare. Federally, fluoride is regulated as a prescription. You can't get it over the counter. We looked at that as an option.
Yeah.
But why would we put a prescription into somebody's drinking water without their consent?
Right.
Every single body's different. You have different needs. You don't go take other prescriptions without speaking to a healthcare professional. So why this one? And we changed that while still allowing them to get that prescription through the pharmacies.
It's what I like to refer to as like the win-win, right? Those that want fluoride can now get fluoride easier, and those that don't want fluoride in their drinking water don't have to have that. But let's talk about that for just a minute. So you brought up a couple things that I think are as important that the public needs to know is why. I think that's how. Why did we need to remove fluoride from water? And I know there was a court case in California that brought some new information to light. Do you want to talk about that and maybe some other things?
Yeah, last year there was a ruling in a federal court that said that having fluoride in the water at the levels that are currently the national standard, at the levels that we were using here in Utah, it said that that level caused an unreasonable risk of injury to health and the environment. And there were studies that were discussed as part of that court hearing talking about detriment to IQ in children who had a lot of fluoride exposure. And that was one of the many reasons that we looked at doing this. It was certainly a reason why the water districts are concerned. They don't want to be out putting something into people's water that are going to be harmful to the population.
So let's talk a little bit about this, because a lot of the criticism I remember was it's natural. Fluorides, there's naturally in our water. Talk about the minerals versus the chemicals that is added. So,
so the fluoride we put in our water is not natural.
Yeah,
there's nothing natural about it.
Hydrofluoric acid, right?
Hydrofluorosilicic acid.
That's a big word.
It's a really big word. So the natural fluoride is calcium fluoride. We modify that a little bit to have sodium fluoride.
And that's a mineral.
That calcium fluoride is a mineral. You can get that from the ground.
Mineral versus chemical.
Mineral versus chemical.
Yes.
Sodium fluoride is the type of fluoride that's found in your toothpaste. It's what's found in those prescription fluoride tablets. Hydrofluorosilicic acid is a byproduct of phosphate mining. And what's interesting is since we've removed that and had them stop putting it into our water system, the amount of regulations surrounding fluoride disposal, it is so incredibly heavily regulated at a federal level because of how toxic and corrosive that substance is. We didn't have those regulations to put it into our water, but we have them to do anything else with it, which I found really interesting.
That chemical acid eats concrete. I've seen it. Talk about it. I know there was some discussion around some of the concerns around those that are exposed to it as they're putting it into into our water systems. I know you probably have a little more information on that. Do you have anything you want to share there?
Yeah, so when water operators are handling this chemical, it's full hazmat suits, head to toe. And as we were going through this process, I spoke to a former water operator who actually had his lungs permanently damaged and has been receiving workers' compensation for the last, I forget how many years, but 10 plus years, because the doctors still don't know what to do. There was improper handling that occurred. There was a flash of the gas, and he inhaled that gas off of that acid, and just that has permanently damaged his lungs. There was also, on the other end, there was a fluoride spill in Sandy, Utah, a handful of years ago, and we heard from a young man during one of the committee hearings about his exposure to the chemical during that spill. And that was caused by a mechanical failure, which led to an overfeed in the system. This young man, who was a little boy at the time, was exposed through the water fountain at his elementary school and has had the rest of his life changed
because of that. So, and I think it's a great example, decades ago when it was approved, and it was approved by the voters, but we didn't have the same information that we have today around how harmful some of those chemicals are and that chemical is. So.
And that's the beauty of science, is it's always evolving. Yeah. We should always be questioning. We shouldn't say, we've been doing this for 100 years, we need to keep doing it. Yeah. So many things have changed. And what's interesting on the history is we have this lack of decay that we've really strongly linked to fluoride. But fluoride and toothpaste actually entered the system within just a few years of each other. And so you can't really pinpoint, was it the internal consumption through the water system? Was it the fluoride in the toothpaste with the topical applications? A lot of studies suggest that there is some topical benefit, but there's not an ingested benefit. but we don't really know because there are no studies that bifurcate those two things out. But what we do know is that it can cause harm. And when there's that option for harm, we have to allow the consumer to choose for themselves. We have to let parents make that choice for their kids.
Parental choice, absolutely. So let's, Utah again being the first state in the nation, but you just came up with that on your own. So Representative Kristen Chevrier, the two bills that you ran, Secretary Kennedy's office actually reached out to Representative Lisenby and myself saying, hey, we'd like to run these two bills. Do you have anybody interested? And Representative Lisenby mentioned that Representative Kristen Chevrier had those two bill files open already. So we were able to work together to get that with the Secretary Kennedy's office to help get those bills passed. But when Secretary Kennedy's office found out about the fluoride bill, he was shocked. He'd talked about it quite a bit, but had not reached out, didn't think anybody would do it, didn't think it would happen. So congratulations.
Thank you. It was a constituent that brought the bill to me. They brought it to me. They had recently moved from Salt Lake County where there is fluoride in the water. So even though my area in Utah County doesn't add it, she was concerned about that exposure for her kids. And we didn't know how it was going to end when we got started, but we did it, and it was a great effort. And Representative Chevrier was amazing to help with that. I've known her a long time, and she's always been a health freedom advocate. So it's been really cool to be able to work with her on some of these issues.
I don't think people in the public truly understand that almost all the bills that are introduced in the legislature are brought forth by our constituents. And so congratulations to your constituent and to you on that great piece of legislation. Now, Representative Chevrier, let's come back to the other bill that you ran on school lunches.
Let me just touch on SNAP quickly again. So SNAP was the very first file I opened as soon as I got elected. I was elected on the 7th. I think I came in on the 10th. And talked to Ledge Research. Yes. So I opened it. I didn't know what to do with it. But I opened it, and I was heavily discouraged by some of the food industry and other people. And so I just kind of set it aside. And then you came to me, and I was like, oh, glad that I didn't close it. Yeah. I was glad it was sitting there.
Because it was like 2 days before the session, if I remember right, or a week before the session.
It was right before
the session started when Secretary Kennedy's office
I got a text from you and from Carrie Ann Lisenby.
Yes, we were on the same text thread. It was awesome.
So that was fun. And then I had a couple of moms bring the food dye bill to me, and then they also wanted that one, so that was cool.
And that actually
it lined up.
I remember that one. I think the session had already started when Secretary Kennedy's office reached out and said, hey, would you consider this food dye bill as well? So you were ahead of Secretary Kennedy as well.
Let's just make sure that Utah gets credit for that, right?
Right. So let's talk about food dyes.
So the food dye bill, for many, many years, we have known that there are synthetic dyes that are in our food and other ingredients. There are other petroleum-based ingredients that are in our food that are very dangerous.
Petroleum-based. That's what got me. That's oil, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the same thing we put in our engines of our cars. Oil is going in our food.
Not healthy stuff. Yeah. And for some reason, it has been put in a lot of our foods. In other countries, they have not allowed these things to be in the food.
Most of Europe, right?
Most of Europe. In fact, I have children who can go eat in Europe and not get sick. Yeah. But here, if they were to eat the same foods that they were eating there, they would be very sick. Yeah. So, and I know many people who have told me the same story. That they can go to Europe and eat and they can't here. So it's partly because we spray things on our food that we shouldn't spray on our food, but it's also partly what we put in it. So what this bill did was it made it so that any school prepared food had to not have those ingredients. And there was a list of, I think, 5 dyes that we removed. Yeah. And initially we had titanium dioxide in there. There is a long list of things that was removed. We took titanium dioxide out of the bill.
Do you regret it?
I do.
Yeah.
I do, so because I have seen research. Yes. In fact, yes, it is in the new bill. Yes. So I've seen research since then that shows that it is actually very dangerous. So we've added that to our new bill.
So let's talk about the opposition
Okay.
To these bills really quickly. I want you to give me, obviously there's a lot of opposition that comes out on a lot of different bills. Give me your most interesting story you think the public would find on some of the opposition that came forward.
Well, the most interesting thing to me was that I removed the rural school districts from the bill because I thought that they would object based on cost.
Yes.
And actually lost votes
because
I removed the rural districts. So some of the legislators said, hey, our kids are just as important as anybody else's. Why did you take ours out?
Yeah.
And then after the session ended, I went and talked to the rural districts. I had a presentation already to try to convince them that they wanted to do it. And we started the meeting and they said, well, we really want to do this. So what do we do?
Yeah. So it's getting done anyway. So interesting. Charter schools, same thing. Charter schools was exempted from the bill. And I actually had charter schools reach out to me saying, hey, why did you
And I've been told since that they would like
to be part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the most surprising thing to me.
Interesting. Representative Gricius?
Yeah, I'm going to give you an opposition story and a support story, both of which were equally interesting to me, and I can't decide which one's better. So with the opposition, it came from the dental associations, the oral health coalitions. It didn't come from the people. Yeah. I heard from only a handful of people in opposition. But I heard from a lot of providers. But I also talked to a couple of providers who were like, yeah, that's great. Go do it. Great. But so there was a very clear disconnect there between the people and the interest groups. But the most interesting part of the opposition was they refused to have the conversation. So I had reached out to a representative for them and was told, oh, just send us a draft when it's done and we'll give you feedback. And I said, no, this is something that's actually going to make some changes. I would like to have a real sit-down conversation and talk to you guys about what's going on and why we're doing this. And they were like, great, well, just send us a copy when you have the bill done. And I was like, great. So I got off with that representative and I called not a House of Representatives, one of the dental representatives. I called the other guy on their payroll and I said, hey, I need a meeting. And he's like, okay, great, let's get a meeting. So we finally were able to get to a meeting. Well, the head of the association comes in. He sits down at the farthest spot away from me in the room, turns his body completely sideways, crosses his legs, crosses his arms, and doesn't look at me for the meeting.
That was a mistake.
It was fascinating. The amount of body language that went into that maneuver was absolutely fascinating. Yeah. And they had brought some people with them that they were intending to use as kind of a trump card to pull me off of what we were doing. They didn't give me a heads up on who they were bringing. So I was surprised to see who came into the room. But that gentleman was so incredibly rude that their trump card ended up helping me
get the bill
on the bill. And coming up with some of the strategies, because I said to them repeatedly, look, I'm not trying to cut access. We need to change this delivery mechanism. If you have a better alternative than prescriptions through the pharmacy, tell me. I'm happy to work with you on that. Nothing. Yeah. It was absolutely nothing. It just needed to go away.
That's a prime example of what I said. That was a mistake.
It was absolutely.
Coming in with that style it just doesn't. We like to find places where we can work together and figure out solutions to problems. And if you're just going to take a hard stand, that generally doesn't end well. And like you said,
it did not end well for them.
The people that he thought was on his side actually turned him off, and you found a different way to find win-win solutions.
Yeah, and I appreciated that. And then the story of support. So one of the things that I was hearing was, you're just telling the cities and the counties what to do. You're telling them they can't do something they've already decided to do. But we have 2 counties in the state that were adding fluoride. The rest of the state was not. So only Salt Lake and Davis. Yeah. And Salt Lake County, their county council actually came forward and passed a resolution in support of this bill.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
In support of the bill, they came and they testified in favor of the bill because they said, this is not the government's role. We don't like that we're doing this. We don't want to be involved. And there are a couple of cities outside of those two counties that do it. And we had representation from some of those come also and say, please pass this bill. This is expensive. We don't see the benefits from it that we expected to see when we first started doing it. And it was interesting to have one group say, you're just telling the counties what to do. And the counties saying, please take this off of our hands. We don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. And so it was just interesting, kind of the push-pull of the different groups as we worked through the process.
One person that they thought might be opposed to it actually came around and supportive of it. Yeah. I'd just like to kind of heighten the fact that what I saw with your bill, especially Representative Chevrier, when the opposition on SNAP, from what I saw, didn't come from the people on SNAP. No. There was some. I'm not going to say there wasn't. But the most opposition came from those who stood to profit or to lose profit. And that's one thing that I just want to point out that I'm very proud of our House of Representatives. And we talk about this and we talk about it often. The House of Representatives is the closest elected body, state representatives to the people. That is something that we take very seriously. And the House of Representatives do put the people first, and they put people over profits. And I see it happen over and over again. And I'm very proud of you guys for the work that you do and you've done on that. To wrap things up, I'd like to come back to talk a little bit about what you talked about, what Secretary Kennedy said, and the states leading out, and the leverage that helped get him to move the needle, to get meaningful reform. Right. And so when we went to Washington, D.C., and got the opportunity to meet with Secretary Kennedy, get the opportunity to be part of the press conference announcing the ban on the 6 food dyes that they were working on, he told the story of the coming to Washington, D.C., and the food lobby being so embedded in the Department of Health and Human Services that he was not getting anywhere. They were just running into brick wall after brick wall. Then comes Utah. Utah comes along, passed the SNAP bill first, the food dye bill first in the nation, and there was a lot of opposition on the lobbies and all around, not just in Utah, not just in Washington D.C., but in other states as well. And other states were running into that brick wall. But when Utah stood up, passed it, other states then pointed to Utah and said, if Utah can get this done, we can get it done. And all of a sudden he had 5 or 6 states that passed similar bills in a couple month period of time. And then the food companies said, whoa, we need to come to the table and negotiate and find a pathway forward, because it's hard for us to have a patchwork of different laws throughout the nation. And so it really is a way of states leading the nation, and it's why we stand up for states' rights so much, and why we believe in that is because the states do lead in so many ways. But any last thoughts?
I just want to say, when Secretary Kennedy came to Utah after our session to celebrate these bills with us, that was his very first official stop. As the secretary. And so it was really, really neat. And I think it set us on a great trajectory to have a great partnership with the administration. We've seen that starting to spill over into other areas of policy. Who would have thought energy policy would be impacted by soda and teeth?
Right.
So it's just been really, really neat for Utah to be able to take that to Washington, D.C., and to punch way above our weight on a national scale. The entire country is looking at what we're doing in Utah right now. Next week, I'm presenting to a group of health secretaries from around the country on fluoride and on some of the other bills that we've done in other spaces also. And it's just so cool to see everybody looking at us, because we just like to live our life here. Like, you don't bother us, we won't bother you, just let us do our thing. But we really have come out swinging this year, and it's been such a privilege to be part of it. It's been so neat to watch you take that and just go. I know that's been such a passion of yours for a long time, and Speaker, with your support. And obviously the entire legislature had to get on board to make these things happen. And so it really was a true team effort. And it's the best team we could ask for.
We do have a great legislature right now. Yeah, absolutely. Representative Chevrier, anything?
So I was just thinking, it's great to see how the fluoride thing is going through the nation now. And then it's also great to see how the food companies are responding to the pressure that they're getting from the grassroots, from the states. Because initially what I was told is we can't do something in Utah because then it'll create a patchwork and it'll be hard for the food manufacturers to cater to Utah and then the rest of the nation. Yeah. And what I told them was Utah has to start it. And once we start it, it'll move forward. And we're seeing Walmart, Sam's Club, Heinz, a whole slew of companies now are saying we're going to be removing those dyes and chemicals from our food. Yeah. So we did start
the public's
something.
Catching on. And it's neat to watch. It's neat to see. So congratulations, ladies. And thank you for being Maha Moms. Thank you for serving in the Utah legislature and in the House of Representatives and putting the people first. Appreciate your service. Thank you.
It's a privilege.
Thank
we appreciate it.
It is a privilege, and we appreciate the support from leadership. Thank you.
Absolutely.